Once upon a time, in the middle of a busy, noisy city, there stood a quiet house with golden gates and tall glass windows. It was the kind of mansion people stared at from afar, wondering who lived inside. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Inside, it was a different story. Lady Serafina Adeyemi lived there, alone but never really alone. The house was full of staff cooks, cleaners, security, but no one truly spoke. They moved carefully like they were afraid of making a sound. No one laughed. No one sang. Even the walls seemed afraid to echo. Serafina's world was quiet. Every morning she woke up at exactly 6 a.m. Her bedroom smelled of fresh linen and lemon oil. The bed sheets were always smooth, untouched by dreams. Before she stood up, she counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her hands shook sometimes, but only a little, just enough to remind her that something wasn't right. She wore gloves always, soft, white ones during the day, silk ones at night, not because of fashion, but because her skin couldn't handle touch, not from others, not even from herself. Her doctor, Dr. Chris, visited often. He adjusted her pills, blue ones for calm, white ones for breath, yellow ones for sleep. He never stayed too long. He never asked how she felt, only what the numbers said. The only person who seemed to see her, really see her, was Auntie Rennie. She was the head of the house staff, but to Serafina, she was more than that. Auntie Rennie had been with her since she was a child. She remembered the days before the gloves, before the rules, before the whispers in the night. Now Auntie Rennie simply watched her with soft eyes. She brought her tea with honey. She wrapped her in thick shawls when the cold Harmattan winds rolled in. She never asked too many questions, but her silence was kind, warm. Still, kindness wasn't enough to break the routine. Every hour of Serafina's life was scheduled. Breakfast alone, morning reading, calls with the family lawyer, emails, charity meetings, all done behind glass. She barely stepped outside. The windows stayed shut. The air was filtered. The world was far away. Sometimes at night she stood by the tall window in her study and looked out at the city lights. They flickered like tiny stars. Life was moving out there, fast, messy, loud. She used to wonder what it felt like to live like that, to be normal. But normal wasn't for her, not with the illness. They called it a condition, something rare, something inherited, but no one ever explained it fully. All she knew was that when people touched her with real emotion, love, fear, care, something happened in her body. So she kept her distance, and the mansion stayed quiet, and Serafina stayed safe. But even in all that silence, a small part of her kept hoping, maybe one day, something would change. The next day, Serafina was standing by the window, just like every other morning, watching the city breathe without her. People moved, cars honked, life continued. But not for her, not in here. Her phone buzzed quietly on the table. Auntie Rennie stepped in. "He's here," she said softly. Serafina turned. "Who?" "The new driver, Raymond." Serafina nodded without looking up. She didn't care much about who drove her, as long as they followed the rules. No talking unless spoken to, no touching, no delays, no drama. Still, something about today felt different. Raymond Ocon stood at the front door, freshly shaven, suit clean but clearly old. His shoes were polished, but the leather showed signs of wear. He smiled when he saw Auntie Rennie, but it was a quiet smile, respectful. He was young, maybe late 20s, handsome but not in a showy way. Calm eyes, steady hands. He'd been trying to get a proper job since graduating from the university. Business degree, good grades, but no one ever called him back. His father was gone. His mother ran a small herbal shop in the village. Money was tight. When he saw the driver ad for Adeyemi Holdings, he almost didn't apply. It felt too big, too far from his world. But something told him to try. And now, here he was. Auntie Rennie gave him a once-over. "Just drive well, that's all she needs." "Yes, Ma," he nodded. Serafina met him outside. She wore a long beige coat and gloves, her face calm but distant. "This is Raymond," Auntie Rennie said. Raymond nodded politely. "Good morning, Ma." Serafina gave the smallest nod. Her eyes didn't stay on him long. They got into the car. She sat in the back as always, window closed. The air inside was cool and still. Raymond adjusted the mirrors, checked the seat, turned the key, smooth start. He didn't speak. She liked that. As they drove through Ikoyi, Raymond noticed things. How she sat straight, never leaning. How she kept her gloves on, even in the car. How she looked out the window but never rolled it down. At a red light, he saw her hand twitch slightly. Not shaking, just tight, like she was holding something in. They drove in silence for a while until traffic suddenly backed up on the bridge. Horns blared. A street hawker knocked on her window, trying to sell water. Serafina flinched. Raymond calmly pressed the lock button. Then he spoke, his voice steady and low. "It's all right, Ma. Just traffic. Nothing will touch you here." Serafina didn't reply, but her hand slowly relaxed. He drove carefully through the jam, choosing lanes that moved, skipping the loudest parts. When the car finally reached her meeting place, she looked at him for a moment longer than usual. He didn't say anything more, just opened her door and stepped aside. She walked off without a word. But inside, something small had shifted. She had felt it. Not pity, not fear, not even interest. Just steady warmth. And she hadn't felt that in a very long time. The truth was, she had been lonely for years. Since her parents died. It happened on her 18th birthday. They had called that afternoon to say they were coming home early. They wanted to tell her something important, something she needed to know now that she was grown. But they never made it. Their car crashed on 3rd Mainland Bridge that evening. The driver died instantly. Her parents didn't make it to the hospital. Since then, everything had been cold, quiet, controlled. The warmth that once filled the house was gone. The truth they were bringing never reached her. But today, for the first time in a long time, someone had spoken to her like she was a person, not a patient, not a CEO, not a problem to manage. Just a person. The next morning, the sun rose quietly behind the tall windows. The mansion was still. The kind of stillness that felt planned. Serafina sat at the breakfast table, untouched toast and warm tea in front of her. Her gloves were already on. The schedule for the day lay beside her plate, printed in neat black ink. Everything was in place. Just the way it had always been. She had not spoken to Raymond since yesterday. He had simply driven her home, parked the car, and left. But last night, as she stood by the window, she had thought about his voice, how calm it was when she panicked in the traffic. No fear, no fuss, just quiet steadiness. She didn't want to admit it, but it stayed with her. She picked up the tea, took a slow sip, and let her thoughts settle. That was when Auntie Rennie walked in. Auntie Rennie was not really her aunt, but everyone in the house called her that. She had started working in the Adeyemi household before Serafina was born. She had held her as a baby, cleaned her scraped knees, stood by her during the funeral, and stayed long after everyone else had moved on. She wore simple wrappers, kept her grey hair tied back, and always smelled of hibiscus and cloves. She had a strong voice when needed, but mostly she moved like a shadow. Quiet, but present. Now, she looked at Serafina with eyes that had seen everything. "Your new driver is on time," she said, pouring more tea. Serafina gave a soft nod. "Good." "He speaks gently," Auntie Rennie added, looking at her without looking too hard. Serafina did not reply. She stared at the rising steam. "He has clean hands," Auntie Rennie continued, "and better eyes than most, I can tell." Serafina finally looked at her. "You like him?" Auntie Rennie smiled a little. "I like that he listens and doesn't ask too many questions." There was a pause. Then softly, Auntie Rennie added, "You used to smile like that." Serafina looked away quickly. "There are rules in this house," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "He will follow them." And there were many rules. Rules to keep her safe, rules to keep her condition under control, rules to keep emotions out of the picture. No touching, no open windows, no personal questions, no loud music, no sudden movements, no delays, no excuses. The house ran on these rules. like a clock that never skipped a beat. Staff were trained to follow them. Drivers came and went because they could not keep up. Too many mistakes, too many questions. But Raymond, he followed everything without being told. That afternoon, Serafina watched him from the back seat again. He drove the way he spoke, calm, controlled. He never rushed, but he never wasted time. At traffic lights, he leaned slightly back, humming under his breath, barely loud enough to hear. It wasn't a song she recognized, but it was soft, comforting. They passed a woman selling oranges by the road. A small boy beside her struggled to carry the basket. Raymond rolled down his window halfway and passed a small bottle of cold water to the boy. "Take," he said. "You're sweating too much." The boy smiled with surprise. "Thank you, sir." Raymond nodded once and rolled the window back up. Serafina didn't say anything, but she watched it all, closely. It was just a bottle of water, just a moment, but it made her feel something strange, something she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't sure if it was peace or danger. She wasn't sure if kindness was something she should trust or fear, but she couldn't ignore it. And from the driver's mirror, Raymond noticed her watching. He said nothing. That evening, after dinner, Auntie Rennie walked into Serafina's study with a cup of warm papaya tea. She placed it gently on the side table. "How did your day go?" Auntie Rennie asked, like she had been waiting all day to speak. Serafina looked up from her book. "It went well. I can see your new driver is adjusting well," Auntie Rennie added. "Yes," Serafina agreed quietly. Auntie Rennie paused at the door. "Not all good hearts are loud, my dear. Some just show up. I can feel he has a good heart." She left without another word. Serafina sat there, the steam from the tea curling into the air, her gloves resting on the table, untouched. And for the first time in a very long time, she did not feel entirely alone. Later that evening, the mansion was quiet again. The kind of silence that almost felt heavy. The lights in the living room were low, the hallways empty. Most of the staff had gone to bed. Raymond stayed back to clean the car and go over the next day's route. He liked to be prepared. As he walked past the garden path leading to the upper balcony, he looked up. Serafina was sitting there, alone. She had a blanket wrapped over her legs and her gloves still on. Her head leaned slightly against the balcony wall. She was not reading. She was not on her phone. She was just staring at nothing. Raymond paused for a second, then kept walking. He didn't call out to her. He didn't wave. He just kept going. But in his heart, he wondered, what is her story? Why does someone who has everything look so lost? He would never ask. It wasn't his place. He was just the driver. But from that night on, he started noticing more, and slowly he began to do small things. Nothing too much, just little gestures, quiet ways of saying, "You're not invisible." The next morning, he left a soft scarf on the back seat, warm and simple, with soft gray and cream lines. Serafina didn't ask where it came from. She just used it when the cold air set in. One afternoon, when she came into the car with a stiff look on her face, tense from a long call, Raymond made a dry joke about Lagos traffic growing roots. It was silly and he almost didn't say it. But to his surprise, she let out the tiniest sound. Not a laugh, but close. He smiled to himself. Another time, while driving past the lagoon, he raised the back seat just slightly, gently, so she could see over the hedge. The sun was beginning to set, casting gold across the water. The light caught her face. She said nothing, but she didn't look away. Then one day something happened. As they were driving through the early evening haze, the air heavy with harmattan dust, Serafina slowly reached out and cracked her window open, just a little. The dry breeze slipped in, soft but sharp. She closed her eyes. The air stung her lungs. It wasn't clean, it wasn't filtered, but it felt real. Raymond didn't say a word. He just glanced at her in the mirror, and for a moment he didn't see the cold, distant woman from the mansion. He saw someone trying to remember what it meant to feel alive. The warmth between them stayed quiet. No one spoke of it. No one pointed it out. But something was changing. Then one morning, a message came in. From the company's vice president. Serafina read it twice. her fingers tightening slightly over her phone. The message was polite, but firm. Ma, just a reminder that the annual foundation dinner is next week. Your presence is necessary. Our biggest donor will be attending and has personally asked to meet you. Serafina stared at the screen. She had avoided events for years. Ever since her parents passed, she has worked from home, Zoom calls, emails, and short video statements. Her face was rarely seen in public as no one knew about her strange illness. The board had accepted it. The media had stopped asking questions, and that was how she liked it. She had made excuses already. Tried to suggest a virtual meeting, even offered to send someone else to represent her. But the client was insistent. She closed the message and stood quietly in her room. That charity dinner wasn't just any event. It had been her parents' favorite night. They always hosted it themselves, greeted guests with laughter, made everyone feel important. She remembered their last message to her, on the night they died. She had been waiting, but they never made it back. She had always wondered what was that important thing they wanted to tell her. Now, every time someone said charity dinner, it felt like a wound opening again. But this time she couldn't hide. She would go. She would be careful. She would wear her gloves, stay distant, keep her breathing calm. No one would touch her. She would be there. But only just. The day of the event arrived. Serafina stood in front of her mirror, her gloved hands pressed gently against the edge of the table. Her dress was dark green, long-sleeved, elegant but quiet. She had chosen it carefully, high neck, no skin showing. She wore soft makeup. Her hair was tied back neatly. She looked composed, but inside she wasn't sure. Still, she had made the choice to go, and she was not the kind of woman who backed out once she gave her word. The charity event was held in a large glass atrium in Victoria Island, the kind of place that echoed softly when people walked across the marble floor. Music played quietly in the background. Waiters moved with practiced grace. Guests arrived in rich fabrics, soft perfume, and bright smiles. Serafina walked in slowly. Raymond followed behind, keeping his distance, but always within reach. She greeted a few guests with a nod and a polite smile. Some people stared, wondering why she was fully covered. Gloves, sleeves, even a thin scarf across her collarbone. But no one asked. They probably thought it was the cold air conditioning. Or maybe just fashion. Either way, they let it go. And for a while, everything was fine. She stood beside the vice president of Adeyemi Holdings, nodded through speech, smiled when necessary. Her heartbeat was steady, her breathing was calm. For once, she felt in control. But it didn't last. The crowd began to grow. More people arrived. The music got louder. Camera flashes blinked. Someone reached out to shake her hand, too fast, and though she dodged politely, it unsettled her. Her throat tightened. She took a small step back. Another person leaned in to say something close to her ear. The mix of perfume and sweat hit her nose too hard. Her hands trembled. She tried to breathe. In, out, in, out. But the air wouldn't come in right. Her chest started to close. The room began to spin. The lights felt too bright. The voices around her became a blur. She was having a panic attack. She stepped away quickly, trying to head for the hallway, but her legs felt heavy. Her vision blurred. Security. Someone whispered. But they didn't move. They had never seen her like this before. No one knew what to do. Her fingers fumbled for her phone. She dialed Dr. Chris. He picked up. Stuck in traffic, Ma, but I will try to get there as soon as I can, maybe 30 minutes. 30 minutes was too long. She could barely stand. Her heart pounded like a drum. She felt the air leaving her like a slow leak. Then a hand touched her shoulder. "Madam," a voice said. Calm, strong, steady. Raymond. He stepped in, gently but firmly. "Madam, look at me. Please, just look at me." Serafina tried to focus, but everything was a blur. Her eyes flickered past him. Her knees buckled slightly. Without thinking, Raymond reached out and held her face, both hands cradling her gently, but firmly. "Breathe. Don't look around. Just look at me." he said again, slower now. I'm right here. You're safe. Just me and you. Nothing else. She tried, but it wasn't enough. Her breath was still stuck. Her hands were cold. Something deep inside her was cracking. And Raymond saw it. He didn't think. He didn't ask. He just acted. He pulled her close enough to hold her up, and then he kissed her, softly, fully, on the lips. The room didn't matter. The rules didn't matter. It wasn't about romance or rescue, it was about anchoring her, bringing her back. For a second, time paused. The noise faded. The spinning slowed. Serafina's eyes blinked open. Her breath caught, sharp, like air finally rushing back in. And for a split second, something passed between them that neither could name. Raymond's lips were still on hers for a second longer than her mind could understand, and then suddenly she pulled away, hard. She stumbled back, her eyes wide, her breath sharp. People were still moving around them, but she didn't see any of it. Her hands clutched her chest. Something strange was happening inside her. She turned without a word and rushed toward the parking lot. Raymond followed, quick but careful. "Sarah," he called softly. "Please, wait." But she didn't wait. She reached the car, opened the back door and slid inside. Her hands were shaking. Her lips still tingled. Her chest felt hot and cold at the same time. And her skin glowing. Not bright, not loud. But under the car's dome light, faint silver lines shimmered across the top of her hands and along her neck. Like soft rivers under her skin, like light caught beneath the surface. She stared at them, frozen. A soft hum filled her ears. Not music, not traffic, just a quiet, eerie sound. Almost like wind blowing through a hollow place. She placed her hand over her ears, but it didn't stop. Then Raymond opened the driver's door and stepped in. He sat down, turned slowly to face her, and stopped. His eyes locked onto the silver lines on her skin. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just stared. Not in fear, but like something inside him had clicked. He kept staring at her, not with fear, but with a strange look in his eyes. Almost like the glowing skin, the humming sound, the silver lines, reminded him of something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Serafina looked away first. "Drive," she whispered. "Please." The ride back to the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Raymond didn't speak. Serafina kept her eyes on her hands, watching the last traces of silver slowly fade into her skin. Her chest still felt tight, but not like before, more like confusion pressing from the inside. When they reached the mansion gate, Auntie Rennie was already outside waiting. Somehow, she knew something had gone wrong. As soon as Serafina stepped out of the car, she said in a sharp voice, "Everyone inside, now!" The staff hurried in. No questions, no hesitation. The door closed behind them. Inside the living room, Serafina walked straight to the mirror above the fireplace. She pulled off her gloves with shaking hands. The glow was almost gone now, only a soft shadow remaining under her skin. She stared at her reflection, her voice barely above a breath. "You shouldn't have touched me." Raymond stood a few steps away, unsure if he should move closer or step back. His voice was gentle. "I couldn't just stand there." Serafina squeezed her eyes shut. Everything felt too heavy, too familiar, too frightening. Behind them, Auntie Rennie whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. "It has started." Raymond looked at her confused, but she only shook her head. A few minutes later, Dr. Chris arrived, breathless from rushing in. He didn't bother to sit. He went straight to Serafina, checking her pulse, her breathing, her eyes. "What happened?" he asked. Raymond stepped forward. "She started panicking at the event. I wasn't talking to you," Dr. Chris said sharply. Serafina flinched. "It's fine," she said quietly. "He helped me." Dr. Chris looked at the fading silver lines on her wrists. He exhaled slowly, almost like he had been expecting this day but hoped it would never come. "Serafina," he said calmly but firmly, "you know what we discussed. Contact. Strong emotional contact. Triggers manifestations. It's dangerous. You must keep your distance." Raymond swallowed hard. I didn't mean to, Dr. Chris cut in. From now on, no touching her. No getting close. No unnecessary interactions. Do you understand? Raymond nodded, but his eyes stayed on Serafina, and she noticed. Just then, Madame Beatrice swept into the room. She always arrived like a storm, trying to look like a soft breeze, tall, elegant, dressed in deep purple lace. Serafina's aunt, her father's younger sister, the only blood relative she had left. She loved Serafina in her own way, but she loved control even more. What happened? She demanded, dropping her clutch on the table. Why are people calling me? Why is there talk of an incident? Serafina stayed silent. Auntie Rennie stepped forward. Madam, let her breathe. No, Beatrice snapped. Not today. Not when the press is sniffing around. She turned to the staff. Everyone, phones, now. They all lined up as security collected devices for a sweep. Anyone who saw anything will sign an NDA tonight. I don't want a whisper leaving this house. Do you hear me? Her voice was sharp, cold. Raymond felt something twist in his stomach. It didn't feel right. Beatrice continued. Call the security company. Lock down the camera feeds. Pay whoever you must. Fix everything. Serafina wanted to speak, but her voice didn't come out. Beatrice finally turned to her niece, softer, but still tense. You left the event early. People noticed. And now, online, she sighed. There's already a rumor. What rumor? Serafina asked, dread curling in her chest. Beatrice lifted her phone, showing the headline of a gossip blog. Heiress seen being kissed by handsome mystery man. Who is he? Serafina's heart dropped. Raymond stiffened. Thankfully, no one had seen what truly happened. The glowing skin, the silver lines, the panic, the collapse. She had left quickly enough. But the kiss. Someone had seen just enough to start a story. Beatrice groaned, pressing her hand to her forehead. People will think you fell for some driver or some stranger. They think you were being romantic. Serafina sat down slowly. Raymond looked at her, the guilt heavy in his eyes. Outside, the world was already building its own version of the truth. Inside the mansion, the real truth was only just beginning to surface. About an hour later, the house was finally quiet again. The staff had gone to bed. Raymond had left. Auntie Beatrice had returned to her house after locking down every phone and video that could cause trouble. Even Dr. Chris had stopped pacing and gone home. Only Auntie Rennie remained awake, sitting silently in the kitchen, her fingers moving slowly over her prayer beads. She didn't speak, but her heart was loud. Upstairs, Serafina stood in front of a door she had not opened in years. Her parents' room. She had kept it locked since the accident. The day they died, the house had shifted. The hallway felt colder, the air felt heavier. She couldn't bear to walk past this door without remembering that final message. We're coming home early. We have something important to tell you. But they never made it. And whatever they had meant to say had died with them. Until tonight. Serafina reached for the key hidden inside her nightstand. Her hand trembled, but she didn't stop. Slowly, she unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was just as they had left it. Her father's cologne still faint in the air. Her mother's scarf is still hanging over the chair. The bookshelf untouched. The bed perfectly made. She stood there silent, breathing it all in. Then her eyes landed on the old wooden trunk at the foot of the bed, her father's private chest. She knelt slowly, opened it. Inside were papers, small notes, a few faded photographs. But at the very bottom there was a leather journal, worn, tired, the edges bent from years of use. She opened it gently. Most pages were filled with business notes, schedules, meeting names. But then, near the middle, a page stopped her. One line written in bold, dark ink. The river remembers. Her heart skipped. She kept reading. Her father had written about a time long before she was born. A deadly illness spreading through the markets. People were dying. The hospitals were overwhelmed. He had been desperate to save the company and the city. Then came something strange. He wrote about a visit to a village near a river. A man named Baba OK, a deal made in secret, a promise sealed not in ink, but in breath. He never said exactly what he gave, only that the first daughter's line would carry the price. Serafina's fingers shook as she traced the ink. Was that what this was? Was her illness not illness at all, but a cost? She took a deep breath, closed the journal, and sat there on the floor of the room that still smelled like her father. For the first time, she felt like the truth had always been here, hidden in these walls, waiting, and now it was waking up. Meanwhile, across town, Raymond sat in the small room he rented behind a compound. The bed was hard. The light bulb flickered. His uniform hung neatly on the door. He stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The image of Serafina's glowing skin replayed in his mind again and again. The silver lines, the soft hum, the look in her eyes. He hadn't meant to kiss her. He just acted. Something deep inside him told him he had to do it, that she was slipping, and if he didn't bring her back, she might never return. And now, he couldn't ignore the feeling in his chest. Something about this was familiar. He remembered the stories his mother used to tell. Late at night, after prayer, when the lantern light was low, she would say, "There is a family that carries breath that is not their own, given to them during a time of death, but borrowed breath must be paid back, and the day it sings, the debt will call." He used to think it was just a tale, but now he wasn't so sure. He remembered the lullaby his mother sang, the name of the river village, the old sayings, the warnings. This wasn't random. It was connected, and maybe he was part of it too. Raymond sat up slowly, his heart steady now. He couldn't keep quiet anymore, not after what he saw. Tomorrow he would tell Serafina everything he knew. Morning came faster than Serafina expected. She barely slept. The journal lay beside her all night, heavy with secrets she didn't know how to carry. When she finally stepped out of her room, the air felt different, like the house itself was waiting. Raymond arrived earlier than usual. He stood in the hallway, holding his cap in his hands, looking unsure but determined. When he saw her, he straightened. "Madam, I need to talk to you," he said quietly. She nodded. "Come." They went into her father's old study. The curtains were half closed. Dust floated slowly in the morning light. Raymond took a deep breath. "My village. We have a story. I don't know if it's the same as yours, but after yesterday, I think it's connected." Serafina sat down. Her gloves lay loosely on her lap. "Tell me." Raymond looked down at his hands before speaking. "My mother used to talk about a powerful family, a family that carried a breath that didn't belong only to them. She said the breath was borrowed during a time of danger, and that one day it would wake. She called it the debt." Serafina felt her heart beat faster. "A borrowed breath," she whispered. "My father wrote something similar." She stood up, went to the drawer and brought out the journal. She opened it to the page with the bold words. "The river remembers," Raymond read aloud. Serafina nodded. "My father made a deal. He never explained it clearly, but it had something to do with saving the city during a deadly time. He wrote about a village near a river, and a man named Baba OK." Raymond's head lifted. "Baba OK? That's the same name from my mother's stories. She said he was a shrine keeper, a guardian." Slowly, the truth began to form between them. Serafina sat back down. So it wasn't just illness. It wasn't something medical. It was a price, passed to me. Raymond looked at her gently. "You've been fighting something you didn't understand." She looked at her gloved hands. "Dr. Chris always told me the medication helped, but I think all it did was silence everything. Keep me numb, safe, but not alive." Raymond watched her closely. "You don't have to stay that way." Serafina breathed in deeply. I either keep medicating myself into a quiet, controlled life, or I go and find the truth. He nodded. And the truth might be at the river. Their eyes met. For the first time, Serafina didn't look away. Later that afternoon, Madame Beatrice stormed into the house, heels clicking sharply on the floor. Her face was tight, carrying the stress of 1,000 rumors. "We need to talk," she said, dragging Serafina into the sitting room. Beatrice didn't waste time. "The rumors are getting worse. People think you're secretly dating someone. They think you ran off with a man. We need to stop this." Serafina leaned back, tired. "How?" Beatrice clasped her hands. "We announce your engagement to Sei." Serafina blinked. "Sei? My distant cousin? He is respectable. He is trusted. It will calm the press. It will take attention away from the man who kissed you." She threw a sharp look in Raymond's direction, even though he was far away. Serafina stood slowly. "Auntie Beatrice?" "No." Beatrice's eyes widened. "You want to ruin everything? You want to destroy the company your parents built?" Serafina's voice was calm. "I want to understand what is happening to me." "That is not your priority," Beatrice snapped. "It is now," Serafina replied softly. Beatrice stared at her for a long second. Then she picked up her bag and walked out. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud. Raymond stepped forward. "Are you all right?" Serafina nodded. "Yes, and I've made my choice." He waited. "I'm going to the river," she said. "To Odell. I need answers." Raymond didn't hesitate. "I will drive you." "Tonight," she added. "We leave tonight. No one must see." He nodded again. "I'll be ready." That night, they started out on their journey. The road to Odell was long and rough. The car shook on uneven ground. The headlights cut through thick darkness. The trees leaned in on both sides as if listening. Far away, drums echoed from small compounds, soft, steady rhythms that seemed to match the beating of Serafina's heart. Raymond hummed a lullaby his mother used to sing, a quiet, soothing tune. As he hummed, Serafina's veins settled. The faint silver she feared so much softened, then disappeared completely. She rested her head lightly against the seat. For the first time in days, she felt still. They drove deeper into the night until the sound of water reached their ears. A slow river, moving like it had a memory of its own. Raymond parked the car. Ahead of them, lit by lanterns and moonlight, stood a small shrine made of clay and old wood. And there, waiting by the edge of the water, was Baba Oke, the man her father had written about, the man Raymond's mother had warned him about, the man who knew the truth. The night air was heavy with river mist. The shrine stood still like it hadn't moved in years. It felt sacred but also quiet, like it had been waiting. Baba Oke stood near the edge of the water, his old eyes fixed on Serafina. He didn't bow, he didn't smile. He simply nodded, as if he already knew why she had come. "You are the daughter," he said softly. Serafina stepped closer. "Did you know my father?" Baba Oke looked toward the river. "He came here many years ago, during the time of sickness. People were dying. The city markets were empty. The land was drying up. My father, he made a deal?" she asked. Baba Oke nodded once. "Yes, he begged the river to save the land. He promised something in return, something only a spirit could hold." Serafina's voice shook. "And that something was... me?" "Your breath," Baba Oke replied. "Not your body, not your soul, but your breath, your inner life. A promise passed through blood." She stared at the water. "So I've never really been sick?" "Not in the way you think," he said gently. "Your illness is a bond, a thread, a whisper of the deal your father made. And now, it is speaking again." Raymond stepped forward. "How do we undo it? There has to be a way to break it." Baba Oke closed his eyes. "I can't say. I was only a witness to the bargain, not the keeper of the cure." "Then who can help us?" Serafina asked. He looked at Raymond. "You already know." They left the shrine with heavy hearts. It was still dark, but the sky was starting to soften at the edges. A faint pink light touched the trees as they drove through the narrow paths. Raymond looked over at Serafina, who hadn't spoken since they left. He quietly reached for his phone and dialed a number. His mother answered on the second ring. A few hours later, they arrived at a small compound just outside a quiet village. Chickens moved across the dusty yard. The house was old, simple, peaceful. Mama Leo stood outside waiting, tying her wrapper as they stepped out of the car. She smiled when she saw Raymond, but her eyes quickly shifted to Serafina. "You brought her," she said, not as a question, as a knowing. Raymond nodded. "We need to talk." They sat in the small living room, the breeze passing gently through the window. A steaming pot of herbs boiled quietly in the corner. Mama Leo listened as Raymond told her everything. The event, the kiss, the glowing skin, the journal, the river, the shrine. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "I was hoping it wouldn't reach this day," she said. "But the river always remembers." Serafina looked at her. "Do you know what this is?" Mama Leo folded her hands on her lap. "Yes. A long time ago, your father came to the river for help. The spirit listened, and in return, it tied the cost to two bloodlines, yours and mine." Raymond frowned. "What do you mean?" "My family," Mama Leo said, "was chosen to carry part of the weight, not the illness, but the key to it. We are the keepers." Serafina's eyes widened. "So when Raymond kissed me?" Mama Leo nodded. "It was a test. The river needed to know if the breath could still be touched with truth. Only a touch given without gain, without pity, without fear, can unlock the next step." Raymond leaned forward. "But if my kiss was the right kind of touch, why did it make her flare up? Why did it hurt her?" Mama Leo looked at him with tired eyes. "Because your kiss opened the bond. But the pain came from what your father did afterward." Serafina held her breath. Mama Leo continued. "The deal he made was clean. But after the spirit gave him mercy, he went back. He took more. He broke small rules. He lied. He acted out of greed, and the river grew angry." Raymond whispered. "So the illness stayed longer than it should have." "Yes," Mama Leo said. "The river didn't punish your father. It punished the breath he offered you." Serafina closed her eyes, the weight sinking in deeper than before. Raymond's voice was quiet. "So what happens now?" Mama Leo stood and walked to the window. "Now, the river is listening again, because of you." She looked at her son, then at Serafina. "The debt can be lifted, but it won't be easy. The river doesn't just want to be paid. It wants to be honored." Mama Leo's voice hung in the air like a quiet bell. "The debt can be lifted," she said again, her back still toward them. "But the river will not accept shortcuts. It wants truth. It wants heart." Serafina sat very still. Her hands rested on her knees, but her mind was racing. For years she had lived inside a careful shell. Pills, gloves, quiet rooms, closed windows, a safe life, but a life without breath. Now she knew why. "Tell me what the river wants," Serafina said softly. Mama Leo turned around. Her eyes held a mix of sadness and strength. "You must prove that you carry your breath with honesty. Not fear, not shame, not hiding." She came closer and sat opposite her. "There are 3 things you must do," Mama Leo said. 3 tasks. If you complete them, the river may let you go." Serafina nodded, her eyes steady. "I'm listening." Mama Leo held up a finger. "First, you must serve life, not image. There is a small riverside clinic near Odell. It barely survives. No electricity most days. No proper beds. No staff. Go there. Help them. Quietly. No cameras. No news. Just your real heart." Serafina nodded slowly. Mama Leo held up a second finger. "Second, you must return what was taken. Your father stole land from people in this region. You must give it back. Not halfway. Not through tricks. All of it." Serafina's chest tightened. "I did not know he did that." "He hid it."
Mama Leo said gently. But the river knew. Then she held up the third finger. And finally, you must speak the truth.
Publicly. Tell the world what your family did. Admit what the river gave and what it took. Raymond looked at Serafina with worry. That could destroy the company. Mama Leo nodded. Truth destroys lies, but it also frees breath. The small room fell quiet. Serafina looked down at her hands. Her gloves were still in her lap. She felt the weight of everything, her childhood, her illness, her silence. And now, the truth. She lifted her head slowly. I will do it, she said. All of it. Raymond exhaled like he had been holding his breath for minutes. We will do it, he corrected gently. You're not alone. For the first time, Serafina believed it. The sun rose quietly behind them. Serafina watched it through the window, feeling something in her chest open little by little. Meanwhile, back in the city, Serafina's cousins, Ireti and Sei, were already moving fast. They had always wanted the company. They hated that a quiet woman who barely showed her face in public controlled everything. The gossip about the mystery kiss was the perfect chance to weaken her. They began forging documents, paying off journalists, leaking videos from the event, creating fake board reports saying Serafina was unstable, unfit, and hiding too many secrets. By the afternoon, half the blogs in Lagos were buzzing. What is wrong with the Adeyemi heiress? Is she suffering from a communicable disease? Is the Adeyemi empire shaking? Who is the man she ran away with? When Beatrice saw the news, she rushed into her room and called Serafina immediately. Sarah, please, she begged over the phone. You must lie, just this once. Say the man was a friend. Say it was a joke. Say anything. If you don't, you will lose everything your parents built. Serafina held the phone to her ear, but didn't close her eyes. She didn't curl up. She didn't shake. She just breathed. No, Auntie, she said softly. I won't lie anymore. Beatrice froze. Sarah, listen to me. I listened my whole life, Serafina said. But hiding the truth didn't protect me. It trapped me. Beatrice's voice broke a little. Do you want them to destroy you? Serafina looked at Raymond, standing quietly in the corner, waiting for her answer. She felt a strange strength rise in her. No, she said. I want to be free. Beatrice said nothing for a long time. Then she whispered, Your father would never. My father made this mess, Serafina said gently but firmly, and I will clean it. She ended the call. Raymond stepped closer. Are you all right? Serafina took a slow, steady breath. For once, her lungs did not shake. Yes, she said. I finally am. She turned to him. I'm ready, she said softly. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, his eyes warm and steady. The following week, Serafina quietly returned to the village. No news crews, no photographers, no press release, just a simple bag, simple clothes, and a silent promise in her heart. She began working at the small clinic near the river. The building was old. The walls had cracks, the beds were too few, the shelves were nearly empty, but the people were kind. The nurse on duty welcomed her with a smile. The children stared in silence. No one recognized her at first, not the CEO, not the heiress, just a woman in a clean shirt wearing gloves and ready to work, and she did. She swept floors, cleaned wounds, paid for medicine and new equipment, bought a backup generator, hired 2 more nurses. She fixed broken fans, served water, sat beside crying mothers. Sometimes she would sit with patients just to talk, just to listen. Raymond stayed close, always waiting outside or helping quietly in the background. He never crossed boundaries, never forced words, but his presence was steady, like a hand resting near yours, not touching, but always ready if you needed it. At night they sat under the stars. They shared small stories. She told him about the first time she rode a bike as a child, how she fell and her father carried her inside, whispering that pain was part of becoming strong. He told her about the time his mother lit a candle for someone who had cursed her, just to pray for their peace. They laughed sometimes, and sometimes they just sat in silence. One night, as she watched the lantern flicker in her room, she placed a hand on her chest. Her heartbeat was slow, peaceful. She was healing. After 3 weeks, Serafina stood before a small crowd at the riverbank. A press tent had been set up, but she had chosen the location. Not the city, not a hotel, but the very place where her story began. She wore a plain dress. No jewelry, no makeup. Her gloves were on, but her words were bare. She faced the cameras. "My name is Serafina Adeyemi," she began. "I was born into a powerful family, a respected name. But what I didn't know was that our power came with a cost." She spoke of the illness, the river, her father's deal, the breath that had never truly been hers. She shared the truth, fully, not to gain pity, but to release the weight. "I am giving back the land my father took," she said. "I will use my position as the CEO of Adeyemi Holding to do good. I will now lead the foundation, not from a tower but from the ground, where people live, where they hurt, where they hope." She turned slightly and pointed to a small sign. It showed the plans for a new school by the river, a proper building with books, computers, toilets, and teachers. "For years," she said, "we made promises and never kept them. That ends now." The crowd was quiet. Then the elders stood. Baba Oke was among them. He raised a staff in the air. "We accept," he said, "and we stand with her." The villagers clapped, the cameras clicked, but Serafina only looked up at the sky, her eyes blinking fast. For the first time, she felt light. But not everyone was happy. Back in the city, Ireti and Sei refused to give up. They released the kiss video to the media, full and clear. They told blogs that Serafina was unstable, that her condition was a curse, that she could not even touch another human being. How could someone like that lead a billionaire company? They pushed headlines filled with shame. "Can a sick woman lead a nation's future? Mystery kiss, mystery illness, the heiress with a secret." But the village elders spoke louder. They held a press conference of their own. They confirmed the truth. They stood by her story. They reminded everyone of the lives Serafina had saved at the clinic, the land she had returned, the school she was building. They did not speak with fear. They spoke with history, and people began to listen. One quiet evening after the noise died down, Raymond found her sitting outside the clinic. She looked up at him as he approached. "They won't stop," she said. "My cousins, the lies." Raymond sat beside her, just close enough to feel his warmth. "Let them talk," he said. "Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stay standing." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You think I can really do this?" He nodded. "You already are." There was a pause. The wind passed gently through the trees. Serafina smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed on him. "I don't know what's happening to me," she said quietly. Raymond tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She touched her chest lightly. "When I'm with you, my heart beats faster. But it's not fear, it's not the illness." He smiled. "Then maybe," he said, "it's just you." She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. The next morning, the sun rose soft and gold over the village. The sky was clear, the air warm. For the first time in a long while, Serafina and Raymond took a quiet walk through the footpath by the river. The ground was soft under their shoes, and the trees above danced gently in the breeze. They didn't talk much, just walked side by side, letting the silence speak. But on their way back, Serafina's foot caught a small stone. She stumbled. Raymond reached out before thinking and caught her by the waist. Their bodies steadied, their eyes locked. Just a few seconds. No words. Then Raymond quickly stepped back, his face worried. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to—" But Serafina suddenly burst out laughing. Not a small laugh. A deep, full laugh from the chest. One that came with joy, not fear. Raymond looked confused. "What's funny?" She turned to him, her face glowing with tears in her eyes, but this time they were happy tears. "I have no reaction," she said, stepping closer. "No pain, no silver, no hum, nothing." She touched her chest. "I didn't flare. I didn't freeze. You touched me. And I'm still here." Raymond stared at her. "You sure?" She didn't speak.
She stepped forward and hugged him, her arms around his body. No gloves, no distance, no fear. He held her gently, unsure for a second, then fully. She whispered, "I'm free, Raymond. The river has released me." Later that evening, they sat under the tree outside Mama Leo's house. The stars were peeking through the sky. The air smelled of herbs and cooking smoke. Crickets sang nearby. Serafina leaned back on the bench, her voice quiet. "My parents were on their way home when they died," she said. "They said they had something important to tell me, something that couldn't wait." Raymond listened, his eyes steady. "I used to wonder what it was," she continued. "Now I think I know. They wanted to tell me the truth. About the river, the breath, the deal." Raymond nodded slowly. "I believe that too." She turned to him. "I used to think my life had no meaning, that I was just surviving. But now I know. This is why I'm here. To heal what was broken, to break the silence, to fix what was lost." They both sat in quiet for a moment. The river flowed nearby, gentle and slow. Then Raymond turned to her. "Sarah." She looked up. "I've tried to stay silent about it. I didn't want to cross any lines, but I need to say it." He paused, then continued. "I've never met anyone like you. You carry pain, but you don't let it harden you. You choose truth when it would be easier to hide. And every time I look at you, I feel peace. Real peace." Serafina didn't speak. Instead, she took a slow step forward. She reached up and kissed him. Soft, sure, not rushed. Raymond closed his eyes and kissed her back. No fear, no boundaries, just two people, finally choosing something real. From the distance, Mama Leo stood in the doorway, a soft smile on her face. She watched them for a few seconds, then turned back into the house. She didn't need to say anything. She knew. They were meant to be. The next morning, the sun rose quietly over the village. Serafina and Raymond packed their things slowly. The air felt different now, lighter, like something heavy had finally been lifted. Mama Leo stood outside, watching them with a warm smile. She handed Serafina a small calabash filled with dried herbs. "For peace," she said. Serafina hugged her gently. "Thank you for everything." "You'll come back?" Mama Leo asked. Serafina nodded. "Often. This village. It's part of me now." Raymond placed the last bag in the car. Mama Leo gave him a knowing nod, the kind only a mother could give. Then they drove off, back toward the city. Back in Lagos, Auntie Rennie was waiting at the mansion gate. As the car pulled in, she opened the door with her usual quiet grace. But when she saw Serafina step out, something in her face changed. "You look different," she said, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Serafina smiled. "I feel different." They hugged. No gloves, no hesitation. Auntie Rennie whispered into her shoulder, "Welcome home." But home wasn't waiting quietly. Serafina learned that Ireti and Sei had called a secret board meeting, trying once again to take over the company. This time they had backup. Gossip blogs, legal papers, paid supporters. She didn't flinch. She wore her soft grey suit, no scarf, no gloves. She walked into the boardroom with Raymond by her side. The room went quiet. Sei was standing at the head of the table. Ireti sat beside him, looking smug. But when Serafina entered, their faces changed. "Who invited her?" Sei asked quickly. One of the board members stood up. "She's still the chairwoman." Serafina walked to her seat. "Let's begin." For over an hour, the cousins tried to twist numbers, accuse her of absence, of being unfit, but the board pushed back. Under Serafina's quiet leadership, profits had gone up, the foundation had grown, the new land projects had saved the company millions in tax and restored public trust. "She may not have been loud," one board member said, "but she's been effective." The cousins grew desperate. "You're all blind," Iriti snapped. "She's not normal. She can't even be touched." In front of everyone, she stormed up and grabbed Serafina's wrist. Nothing happened. No silver veins, no shimmer, no breathless collapse. Just skin, just calm. Sei tried the same. "She's faking it," he shouted, touching her shoulder roughly. Again, nothing. Serafina stood slowly. Her voice was soft, but it filled the room. I've carried this for too long, but not anymore.
My breath is mine now. Security stepped in and escorted Ireti and Sei out of the room, their faces pale with shame. Raymond stayed standing by the door, watching her, proud, quiet, steady. Later that day, Madame Beatrice came to the mansion. She didn't rush, she didn't bark orders. She walked slowly, almost carefully, like someone coming to make peace. They sat in the sunroom. I owe you an apology, Beatrice said, for trying to control you, for protecting the name instead of protecting you. Serafina looked at her. I understand. But the truth needed to come out. Beatrice nodded. I see that now. They sat in silence for a while, letting old walls fall. Weeks passed. Ireti and Sei faced full investigations. Fraud, embezzlement, leaked deals, hidden accounts. The company redirected the stolen funds to the Riverside Clinic and the new school project. Land was returned to its rightful owners. Serafina now led the foundation with honesty and heart. She stayed CEO but shared power, creating space for others to rise, including the village elders who once had no voice. The school opened. Children walked through the gates holding books they never thought they'd own. Auntie Rennie started a small food bank. Mama Leo's herbs were used in the new clinic, and Raymond, he never left her side. One evening, as the sun set over the lagoon, Serafina stood on the balcony of her office. Raymond walked up behind her. She leaned gently into him. I used to think I was cursed, she said. But maybe the curse was the silence, and I finally broke it. Raymond smiled. You turned it into something beautiful. They stood there, watching the light touch the water. Peaceful, steady, together. Power without mercy is drought. Breath without truth is smoke. But when compassion kissed courage, the river released its debt. Thank you for listening to her silence, standing with her through the whispers, and watching her rise not just as an heiress, but as a woman who chose truth over comfort, healing over hiding, and compassion over control. Her story reminds us, it's never too late to reclaim your breath, never too late to change your story.